genre.
In the world of Hollywood, movies get greenlit and redlit. They get remade and rebooted. But we are the Ideal. I'm Sam Gasch, and you are listening to Ideal Remake. Thank you for listening to Ideal Remake. We take movies that either have been, will be, or should be remade and talk about what the ideal version of that remake would be. And we here at the podcast believe in one thing overall. It is long past time to abolish the penny. So Scott, is Somewhere in Time a movie that has been, will be, or should be remade?
It hasn't, to the best of my knowledge, which is odd because it's adapted from a Richard Matheson book. So you would think it would have come up again, but it has not.
Well, in order to get it adapted from the Richard Matheson book, Richard Matheson had to adapt it himself.
That's true. You're right. I guess that's true. Yeah. Which is interesting. We'll talk about that. But it should be. It absolutely should be for many reasons. You know, I think one of the main ones is that they don't really make big, sweeping romantic movies like this anymore.
No, they really don't.
Yeah, like the last thing, and it actually has quite a few things in common with this movie, but like the last movie that I can really even think of that even like even got anywhere close to matching the melodramatic romance of this movie is like maybe like somewhere either like The Notebook or Titanic in that range, you know?
I mean, I feel like if you want to get closer to now, you would do something like Last Christmas.
That's a rom-com. That's not the same thing.
I guess. Yeah, I guess that's true. I don't think of it as, I mean, to be fair, I didn't see it, but like the way it was pitched to me and like kind of the long-term arc of the movie is that it's not super comedic.
No, it's very funny, actually. Like it's a comedy. I've seen it.
I think of the Stranger Than Fiction rules of rom-coms where it's like it doesn't end in a wedding.
No, that's true. It doesn't. It's more of like, I guess it's more of a coming of age movie than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't end in like tragedy because, you know, the tragedy kind of already happened. So
yeah, I mean, again, I haven't seen it. So do we know about the tragedy or do we find out about it at the end?
It's a twist. I mean, it's like the most like, you know.
Yeah.
It's like if you know what the song is and you know the lyrics to the song, you know what the twist is like pretty much immediately.
Course.
But yeah.
That movie of all movies is like the one where it was like there were two advertising campaigns going on at the same time. It was like, happy, fun movie. Dark, depressing version of. But yeah. Scott, for people who haven't listened to your many previous appearances on the podcast, will you please introduce yourself before we get too far in?
Oh, sure. I'm Scott Corelli. I run the network that Sam's show is on, and I'm the host of a few podcasts, Franchisography, where my co-host and I, Nick, talk about movie franchises and add context to many of the creative decisions that went into them. And then The Doctor's Companion, which is a Doctor Who podcast, also with Nick, as well as Cass Fredrickson, which is us just talking about all of Doctor Who. We have Geek by Night, the three of us, a show that I created and we all executive produced together, which is an audio drama, and there is drama, but it's also very funny.
That's true.
Yes, but audio comedy, I think, would set you up for something that it is not. So it's all things. It's a
rare narrative podcast.
Yes, it is a scripted narrative podcast, fully cast. I don't know. For all I know, by the time you guys are hearing this, the series finale aired. So
yes, that is accurate.
Yeah. So go listen to the whole thing. 44 episodes.
And then jump on the Discord and compliment it profusely.
Yeah, I need validation. That would be great.
Absolutely. But yeah, so I guess let's talk about Somewhere in Time. Scott, how did you first hear about this movie?
My dad showed it to me when I was 12, and I've been haunted.
Age for it.
I've been haunted by pennies ever since. I was like 12 when I first saw this, and it's so interesting, you know, the context of when Somewhere in Time came out, because this was sort of like a little bit of a blank check for Christopher Reeve, who was coming off of Superman, had already shot Superman 2, but it hadn't come out yet. And so he was sort of like, okay, now's my chance to be a leading man in something that I'm not wearing tights in, and did this thing and was very passionate about it, was like very he was like a big part of like getting this thing made. And, it flopped pretty profusely. Critics turned on it pretty harshly. And the reason was like, they were like, it's melodramatic and it's dumb and you should all be ashamed for making it. Since then, it has grown a massive cult audience to the point where the hotel, which is a real hotel where this takes place on Mackinac Island in Michigan, annually has a Somewhere in Time like convention where everybody, where the whole island gets decked out in 1912 attire and everyone comes out and like acts like it's 1912 and they watch Somewhere in Time, which is the only thing you wouldn't have been able to do in 1912, but they do it. And it's like a whole thing. People love this. And I think it's because it's one of the, other than Superman, it's one of the most sort of like successful attempts that Christopher Reeve had at being a leading man, not financially, not critically, but like it's a movie that holds itself and proves that like Christopher Reeve can lead a movie,
Yes.
Especially as a romantic lead, which I think he does exceptionally well in this because, man, does he do a lot of stuff that should not work.
Yeah, that's true.
This movie, it works despite everything about it, kind of.
The thing that I thought as I was watching this movie is like, if I didn't already know that he was already Superman at this point, this movie would have been the perfect casting tape to prove that he's the perfect Clark Kent.
Yes, 100%.
Not Superman,
right?
Because he's also an excellent Superman, but he's the perfect Clark Kent.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Somewhere in Time is because most people have not seen this movie. Most people have never even heard of this movie. For a long time, it felt like a dream that I'd had or something because no one had ever, I would use this as like a reference and people were like, what are you talking about? That is not a movie that exists.
I love covering movies like that.
Yeah, I know you do. That's why I was like, I rewatched this kind of recently and I was like, oh, I have to.
Yeah.
This is like a perfect Ideal Remake episode.
It really is.
Yeah.
The poster even looks exactly like the Savannah Smiles poster movie that I did a few years ago.
Yeah, and then I remember what's funny is early on in Family Guy's run, when that was a show that I was watching, they made a reference to the Penny situation.
No way.
They made the reference to, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't dream this movie. It does exist. Like, it's a Family Guy reference. Holy shit. So yeah, that was when I was like, I sort of revisited the movie for the first time since I was a kid, and then revisited like a few months ago with my wife, who had never seen it but had always heard of it as the movie that's shot on Mackinac Island. She's from Michigan and she has family up in that area. The funniest thing about this, though, for her, the frustrating thing, was shooting this movie was the only time that cars were allowed on Mackinac Island.
No way.
There are no cars on Mackinac Island.
That's crazy.
Yeah, you park off like there's a parking lot next to the ferry. You take the ferry over and then there's horses. Like that's how you get everywhere.
Holy shit, that's nuts.
Yeah. You cannot drive to Mackinac Island. That is not a thing.
Well, you can't drive to most islands.
That's true, right? Totally, absolutely. But usually sometimes there's like a ferry that has you put the car on the ferry, but no, not on Mackinac Island. So this is like the only time in the history of the island that they allowed cars.
That's a crazy thing to bump on because like that is a fact that I would never have known otherwise.
No, exactly. And that's
who thinks to look that up?
That's what I kept telling her. I was like, they did this because people would bump on it more if it was the 70s and everyone was driving horses than they would with cars. But yeah, the movie just makes it look like he drove straight from Chicago right up to the hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is funny.
Bananas.
Yeah, so this movie is about Christopher Reeve plays a playwright.
Christopher Reeve plays Richard Matheson.
Yeah, plays a playwright named Richard Collier, who in college has this big premiere of his first play that he ever did, and it's like a big hit with the college crowd. And this old woman walks up to him randomly and says, like, find me, and gives him a pocket watch.
Come back to me,
gives him a pocket watch, and then leaves. And he was like, well, that was fucking weird. Okay. Anyway, great play, everybody. And just sort of like goes back to his life. And then you go 8 years later. Now he's a very successful playwright in Chicago, but he's struggling to write his next play. And in order to like write his next play, he like goes away to Mackinac Island just to get away from everything and like figure this out. And that's when he stumbles upon a picture of the woman who walked up to him at his first play, and realizes that she is this woman who he has become sort of infatuated with, this picture of this young woman from 1912 that he sort of becomes infatuated with in this little like tiny museum exhibit about the history of the hotel that he's staying at.
And you would think as a viewer, like, why on earth would he remember this? Sure, it was weird, but we have weirdos walk up to us all the time in life.
Yeah.
But he's kept that pocket watch because it's a lovely pocket watch, and he uses it as his timepiece. He checks whenever he checks his watch, he's checking the pocket watch.
Right.
And so he has this constant reminder of this thing that happened. And then to fall in love with this picture in the museum, and he goes and looks up who this human being is, and he's like, oh, wait, that was that guy?
Yeah,
Like,
that was the lady that came up to me. And,
oh my God.
And then finds out that she actually died that night in her sleep, passed away. Yeah, and so then he's like, what is it? He's like looking up stuff, and then he finds like a picture. He finds a signature. He becomes obsessed with the idea of traveling back in time, but he has to confirm that he could
Different
do
order.
it. Yeah.
So like, because he now sees this woman says, come back to me. But it's clearly this woman from the past. And he's like, okay, well, I'm clearly in love with the past version of her. And he's like, when he goes to find out more about this woman, he finds her old, like, servant, like, friend, assistant lady. And he finds out about, like, about this lady. And he picks up a random book. And as a coincidence, it's a book called, like, Going Back in Time by a philosophy professor that he had in college.
Right.
And so he goes back to talk to that philosophy professor to say, hey, is it possible to go back in time? And the philosophy professor is like, yeah, you can do it. I did it once. It was exhausting, but I did it. But only for a second.
Yeah.
I had to make everything from the present go away, and I had to immerse myself in the moment that I was traveling back to.
Yeah.
And that's how I make it work. And so Christopher Reeves, Richard Collier, is attempting to make this happen, and he can't make it work. And he thinks it's because he doesn't completely believe it. So he goes into like the attic of the hotel and finds an old guest log an old guest log. And he goes through that guest log on the day he's trying to travel back to, or the day after, and he finds his own signature.
Yeah.
And because that confirms that it works, then he's able to, well, I already know it works, perfect. And he's able to push everything else away, and he travels back in time.
He essentially...
1979 to 1912.
Right. So he is in a room in the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island, which has been around for like, at this point, well over 100 years. At this, like today, now.
Yeah.
And so it was definitely there back in 1912. So he just takes everything out of the room that wasn't from 1912, and then essentially lays on the bed and hypnotizes himself into time traveling to 1912. This is the point where we should bring up the fact that time travel... This is one of the movies that was often cited when Robert Zemeckis was going around pitching Back to the Future of why time travel movies never make any money. And why he was turned down at every studio. And
got it. It's one of those Hollywood learning the wrong lesson kind of things.
Yes, absolutely. And so, it's a thing where it's like the concept of time travel is interesting, but no one had quite figured out how to channel it into something popular quite yet.
Yeah.
And it's a very complicated, very magical version of time travel, which is interesting as like a dated thing. It's just funny. I don't know. The whole hypnotizing yourself to go back in time and how it actually works is like, wait, but like, if it's just your mind, how do you actually go there, It
is very, like, H.G. Lovecraft in that, like, all of this fancy technology, what it is just an extrapolation of philosophy. Of, like, once you can wrap your mind around the concept, it's easy.
Yeah. So he wakes up in 1912, and now he, like, has to, like, get a... 1912 room, because he's in someone else's room.
Yeah, he wakes up in someone else's room.
Yeah.
And he's just like, and has to like figure out a way to sneak out.
Yeah, which is a fun scene.
That is a fun scene. I enjoyed that.
And then he tracks down this woman played by a very new to Hollywood, I believe, Jane Seymour, playing this actress, Elise McKenna. who is there to perform in a play. And he tracks her down and is like immediately like, oh my God, it's you. And it's this whole thing where this like only works because Jane Seymour and Christopher Reeve have insane chemistry. And if either one of them, like if that didn't exist, this movie would not work at all.
Yeah. It walks a fine line because like
does.
you take all of his actions in a vacuum and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, buddy,
Yeah.
you're both an idiot and creepy.
Yes.
Like, and because like extra context of like he just got dumped and he keeps obsessing over this random picture of a woman he's seeing in a museum, and it's like, all right, man, cool it. And like he literally, like once he gets back to the past, all he does is go up to her and say like, all right, cool, here I am. You don't know me, but we're in love now.
Yeah.
As if that's supposed to like instantly win her over.
Right.
But the crazy thing is that like, because it's Christopher Reeves, it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Almost immediately.
Almost immediately.
Yeah. Yeah.
And honestly, it would have been immediately if Christopher Plummer hadn't shown up to muck it all up.
Right. Right. Christopher Plummer plays a man named William Fawcett Robinson, who is essentially her agent or manager and is controlling every aspect of her life for reasons of like, he's just like, how does he explain it? He's like, I've seen so many people's careers fail and like, it's important to me that like hers is okay or something. Like
What he says,
he ends up not being like a super bad guy, right? Like,
no. Well,
yeah.
Well, there was also an extra like thread in there that I thought was going to lead someplace else.
Uh-huh.
But, and we'll get to that in a minute. But like he basically, Christopher Reeves ends up believing that Christopher Plummer is basically doing this because he himself is in love with Elise McKenna.
Right.
And that ends up not being true. Christopher Plummer is like, no, you don't understand. Elise McKenna has the potential to be one of the best, if not the best actresses that has ever graced the stage ever.
Yeah.
And I absolutely 100% believe in her. He literally says the line, oh no, I'm blanking on it. What's the, you think I'm doing this just because I want to marry her? I'm not trying to marry her. I want her to be the greatest that has ever existed.
Right.
Like, I want her to be success. And then Christopher Reeves is like, great, we're on the same page. And he's like, no. We're not on the same page.
Yeah.
You are a distraction, and I'm going to make sure you get out of here.
Yeah. 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 He's basically like, that requires, in order to be the best ever, it requires sacrifice. And as long as you're around, she's not going to be willing to make those sacrifices. And he's like, yeah, she's going to live forever as this amazing actress as long as you're not around. Yeah. And so it's interesting because it's like, he's not like completely villainous. It's just frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially because they planted, so the other seed that they planted was when Christopher Reeve first goes up to Jane Seymour, she goes, is it you? And so that got me thinking because she showed up in his past, her future.
Right.
I'm thinking now that he's going to show up in her past. So like, I kept thinking that it was going to be like, because obviously there was going to be this great tragedy about it, but I thought he was going to go back and tell her to wait for him.
Mm.
And then it turns out that she was told by Christopher Plummer, like they have this conversation when they go on a long walk, that Christopher Plummer warned her that this guy would be coming.
Yeah.
And I thought it was literally going to be this guy, and like somehow he was going to mess up his second travel back in time and only be able to talk to Christopher Plummer.
Right.
And so I kept waiting for that, but then I figured out, no, he just was telling her about some guy who might distract her from her destiny or something.
Yeah. The inevitability of her being an attractive woman in 1912. Of course, some guy is going to show up and be like, no, you're my wife now. Congrats.
Yeah, so like, it's a much simpler explanation than I was expecting, but I'd literally just seen someone time travel, so I was kind of expecting that to happen another time.
Yeah. So then they fall in love, clearly, and Christopher Plummer like beats him up, tries to get him out of the way. He was supposed to meet her somewhere so they could run away together. He doesn't show up because he got beat up and he's unconscious and
he got beat up and tied up in the barn.
Right. So he comes out and then she ends up showing back up again, and she didn't go with Christopher Plummer, and she trusted that he would be back, and then they have this amazing night/morning together, and then as they're like goofing around, eating breakfast in bed,
she's like, I need to get you a new suit. Because he goes and gets everything. Like, he gets a suit from 1912, but it turns out it's really a suit from like
1890.
1910.
Yeah.
A year,
No, it was like 1890 or something like that.
Yeah.
It was like very old fashioned.
They keep talking about how like, oh, that suit's so old fashioned in 1912. So and he's like, I like this suit. It's cool. It's casual. It's got so many pockets. And then from a pocket, he pulls a penny.
He pulls out a penny, which has the date 1979 on it, and then it just immediately breaks him out of his hypnosis and zaps him right back to where he came from.
Because it is something from his present, he can no longer exist in the past.
Right.
And so he falls down, gets sick, and gets sucked back through time as he sees Jane Seymour calling back and not knowing what the fuck is going on.
Right. I would love to see what that looked like from her perspective.
I was dying to know what that... Because obviously it means she now also believes in time travel.
Yeah.
I don't know how she found out about the play.
Yeah.
But, like, it's not like she was constantly Googling his name for the rest of her life.
Right. And then he tries desperately to go back, and he can't. He can't hypnotize himself again. It's too hard. And then he basically loses the will to live and starves himself to death and dies.
Yep. And then
in
they
the
meet
hotel.
up together as ghosts.
And they end up together as ghosts in a scene that is identical to the ending of Titanic. I am fully convinced that James Cameron saw this and was like, I could do this better. And you know, it eventually led to Titanic. Because
I mean, it also talks about both the female lead is like the one carrying on for another 60, 70 years, while the male lead just is like, oh, well, I'm sad, and bounces.
Yeah, true. True.
Different reasons, but...
Yeah, but in both cases, I feel like, you know, the women in the audience, in both cases, I think found the men doing what they do just agonizingly romantic.
Of course.
Yeah. So it's like it still kind of works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a reason it happened twice.
Right. Very true.
But yeah. So yeah, this is a movie that is very successful at what it does. And as someone who's had to watch, well, rom-coms, but other romance movies as research for pitches I've been having to do this month, this was obviously the best of all of them.
Oh, that's good.
So that's kind of what this movie is it's a fairly simple concept. Like it's an hour and 45-minute movie with really 3 characters and a couple like little side characters.
Yeah.
And the kind of premise is that like you fall in love with someone who is not of your time, but you do everything in your power to get to them. Mm-hmm. But they're still not of your time, so it can only end tragically. Or it would have ended better if you hadn't saved your damn penny.
Right, that's very true. And the worst part is, if you rewatch the movie, you see him put that penny in that.
Oh, do you?
In that suit, yeah.
Oh no!
So you watch it. I watched it, and when it happened, I just went. And Bethany was just like, my wife was like, well, she was like, what? What's wrong? And I was like, you'll find out.
Oh no! When does he put the penny in his suit?
He's like wearing it, and he gets change. Like he's wearing it out of the place, and he gets the change, and the change is just like, some loose coins, and he pulls the coins out before he hypnotizes himself, but he misses the penny. Yeah.
That's rough.
So it is very set up, actually, which is, I think, one of the reasons why it has such a cult following, because it's like, no, it works. Like it runs on its own logic, but it does follow everything logically, you know?
So at least we know now who the true villain of the movie is.
Yes, Abraham Lincoln.
That's the joke I was going to build towards, but the actual answer is the suit manufacturer. Because not only did he went in and asked for a suit from 1912, and that's not what they sold him. They also gave him exact change, which was the cause of his whole downfall.
It's true.
They fucked up twice.
I know.
And now he's dead.
Yeah. And maybe he should have just said keep the change, you know? Like, I
mean, that's also true.
He's a playwright. He's got plenty of money.
Well, it's also because like he should have said keep the change, because like what is he going to do with it? He doesn't need it anymore. He'd already gone and gotten his money from 1912.
I know.
He specifically went and got 1912 money.
Mm-hmm. He sure did.
Yeah. Yeah, all right. So the true villain of the movie is Christopher Reeves. Because like
his own worst enemy.
Well, he shows up in this whirlwind, basically wrecks this woman's life, and then bounces.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because, like, what's she gonna do? She just learned magic is real.
It's true. It's true. I mean, she doesn't really like they say that she like acted a little bit after that, but it never really
Yeah.
became this megastar that she was supposed to.
The spark went out of her. Although clearly she was still loaded.
Right.
She was still loaded. She like commissioned this music box shaped like the hotel that played his favorite song.
Yeah. I feel like the only people who became actors back then were rich.
That is accurate, yes.
Were from rich families. So
it depends on the kind of actor you were.
Well,
if you
yeah,
were in
sure.
comedies, you were poor.
Yeah.
If you were in romance and dramas, you were rich.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So I guess let's first talk about like
time period.
Time period? Sure, we can talk about the time period if you want to talk about the setting.
No, finish your thought.
It's related to the other thing that the other thing that I think this movie's missing.
Go for it.
In a modern context. So for me, I guess context. Let's go all the way back to Richard Matheson. So his original short story or novella or novel, I forget what it was set in different years than the movie was. The movie was all updated, so everything was sort of pulled forward.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, the original was set in San Diego because San Diego has like that old town.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where it took place.
Oh.
And he went back to like 1890 or 95, which is what the suit is a reference to.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when Richard Matheson adapted his novel into this movie, he updated all of the dates and pulled it forward to 1912 and 1980. And so I feel like we should not be afraid to do the same thing.
Oh, yeah. I feel like we have to.
Right. So my thought was like, okay, say this movie's coming out in 2024, right? And that would mean that if we wanted to have the two modern timelines of like 1972, 1980 equivalent, then it would be 2016 and 2024. But like, I don't know that we really need it. I don't know that we need all that space, that time.
I don't think we need that 8-year jump in advance.
That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I don't think it's really necessary. I think it's something that he put in because it was in his novel.
Yeah.
And not
I think it's a distraction.
I agree.
Because it's like, otherwise it's like, you remember what this one random lady you saw once for 30 seconds 8 years ago looks like?
Yes, I completely agree. So I think we just have the modern day 2024 and leave it at that. And I think if you're going to go back, you go back the 60 years, just like it's supposed to, which brings us to 1964.
Yep.
What happened in 1964 that was a big historical moment and a location?
I mean, boy, I feel like the answer is it's a big music concert, and I can't think of the name of it.
Are you thinking of Woodstock?
I am thinking of Woodstock, but I think that was 1969.
No, it is the 1964 New York World's Fair.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And so with that in mind, I was thinking about like, well, okay, so if it's the World's Fair, I feel like we kind of have to change what their like occupations are a little bit, because like we have to figure out a reason for her to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And for a reason for him to want to go back there. And one of the things that I would like to jettison is the idea of him falling in love with a picture of her before going back. It's cute and it's big and romantic and very sweeping in this.
It has strong incel energy.
It's not great. It's not great because he doesn't know anything about her, right? So what I was thinking was like, the World's Fair being this sort of representation, and like, we know historically there was a lot of crazy shit that was going on in the 60s. Everything was changing, right? But the World's Fair was sort of the last time that America was looking toward the future in a meaningful way.
I think that decade was. We literally have the moon landing 5 years later.
We do, but it's the only. That's it. That's the end of it.
Yeah.
And like, we have the start of like the start of the war. We have like the hippie movement. All of that happens like 2 years later.
That's true. Yeah.
The start of that. So it's like, Yeah, and you have the assassination of JFK, which had just happened the year before.
Mhm.
So it's like we're already moving toward that. We're moving toward the assassination of Martin Luther King. All of these things where like people start losing faith in like society and the government and all of this. But at this point, we're not over that hump yet, right?
Yeah.
And we're still like looking toward the future. And we
Mhm.
have like society has all these dreams about what the future could look like and all these things. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how much I miss that aspect of the sort of like American philosophy,
Mhm.
right? Everything else about it needed to change without a doubt.
Oh, for sure.
And we fought for it, and we're still fighting for it, and it needs to continue to change. But wouldn't it be nice to be hopeful about the future again?
I feel like the thing that like my initial response to that is there is the idea that he is one of those like kind of like nostalgic, glorifies the past kind of dudes, and then she can be a futurist.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to have the kind of two things at the same side. But I feel like, but that doesn't necessarily tell us what he does for a living. And I feel like the idea of the whole weaponized nostalgia might not necessarily endear him to people in ways that we necessarily want.
Well, I think it depends on how you present it.
Sure. Okay.
Because, if you present it as, he misses the idea of hope for the future, right?
Mhm.
And the idea of like, yeah, so like, he could be a futurist, he could be these things, but it's a thing where like, whatever it is that he's doing, he's not successful at it because no one else is. No one else is a futurist. They're not asking about like, he presents like something like an invention or something he's presenting like some kind of invention or some kind of something to a board of, people that would fund this venture.
Mhm.
And their questions are not about how this would progress society. It's about how is this profitable?
Yeah.
And he's like, that shouldn't matter. Think about all of the good that this would do. And they're like, good doesn't pay the bills,
Mhm.
And it's just like, it's that sort of like him being faced with like the ugliness of late stage capitalism.
Yeah.
And that is what he romanticizes about the 60s, about how like, he's like, yeah, it was better then because like people were looking toward the future and they had all these hopes and they wanted progress and they wanted all these things. He'll go back and he'll learn differently, which I'll get to later. But that's sort of what I was thinking. And I was thinking about the theme of like a relationship and how like the World's Fair could be like this representation of like their future together while also their visions of being futurists, and that sort of like linking them together versus like an actress and a playwright, which just feels like the most obvious connection,
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's kind of what I was thinking. I felt like this movie was missing a theme that wasn't just romance. So, but what were you going to say in terms of what you were thinking of?
I absolutely can go the way with the inventor, because if we're going the way with the inventor, like you can literally have them both be kind of like simultaneous different kinds of inventors.
Mm-hmm.
And he's trying to invent something, and the only way he's able to get it to work is when she shows up with the final missing component and then leaves. And that's the only way he's able to ever get it to work, is because she brings the missing piece.
I like that. I would like to pitch a different version of kind of the similar thing because it's
Sure.
more playful with time. Just because whatever he created is probably a piece from the 60s is probably not going to be super helpful.
Well, like I tend to think of it in terms of like, you know how they talk about different radioactive decay and different isotopes of like, you can tell different pieces of like iron that are post advent of atomic weapons and pre advent of atomic weapons because of like the whatever radiation is a part of it. Is he literally needs something that's that old because that's how he's able to lock into the time.
Oh, okay.
That's
sure.
what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
But either way, she lived through the time, so that doesn't work scientifically because she also moved forward in time. It's not like the piece of metal, because like we didn't even talk about in the original movie of like how that pocket watch just goes in a loop through time.
Right.
It only exists in a time loop, that pocket
Right.
watch.
Yes, it does.
We didn't even reference the fact that at the end of the movie he left it behind, but we assumed he did.
Right.
But my pitch outside of inventors was, if we stick to the artistic nature of it, if he is a novelist, you can be someone where he intentionally goes back and writes futuristic novels, but he does the sort of thing where he extrapolates from points of time in the past of like, if we had the 70s iteration of the future and we traveled that all the way through, if we did the retrofuturism and followed it all the way through. And so he's trying to come up with the next idea for his book and he can't do it. But he still has to go to this book signing. And so at this book signing, it's a line of people. Oh, I love you. I'm so excited for your next book. Yeah, me too. I sure am too. Oh boy. And then this old woman shows up in line and hands him something to sign. And it's not even his book. And he just signs it without looking at it. And he hands it back and she's gone. And so now he's just left with this notebook from this woman.
Oh.
And that's all he has. And all of a sudden it's that notebook now that he's like, what do I do with this? And he just starts reading it more and more. And that's kind of what brings him to Mackinac Island or the New York Fair or wherever we end up deciding to put it.
So I like that because my pitch to replace the photo was that the thing that he falls in love with is her work.
Yeah, that's so much better.
Like he falls in love with her work, and the work is what inspires the thing that makes the invention work instead of like a part. It's like he's reading this and like he's like, oh my God, yeah, I do this and this. Holy shit. Like, you know, and it's working.
Yeah.
And maybe that thing is a time machine, maybe or some sort of time travel device, but it isn't the hypnotizing type, which is very silly.
It is.
I think it's enough that he has to go to a place that existed in the period of time that he had to, you know, like that. I think that makes enough sense that we don't need to hypnotize him.
Yeah. Well, he needs to go to a place that existed in the past. He needs to try to get to the past and it doesn't work. And then he has to find proof that he did, in fact, that it works. Because like, the whole thing exists on belief and like believing that it works.
Right.
And like, there's so many different ways to prove that you were in the past.
Yeah, but and the thing that I like about that is that it is sort of like a very like firm connection to like his whole optimistic outlook of the future and things like that. So it's like, oh wait, I have proof that I'm right, and that like like I can do this. Like this can work. And I think I really like all of that. I think that's really good.
Cool. Yeah. Well, like I think having them be like let's have her be the inventor. Let's have him be the novelist. And like he can absolutely believe in her because like she is this hopeful person. And it even makes sense where this crazy thing happened to her. Like some dude fucking disappeared. And instead of just like spending the rest of her life in a sense of forlorn longing, she instead spends her life researching and figuring out and learning exactly what happened to try to see what she could do to get back together with this guy.
Yes.
And the best she was able to do is at the very end, she can't get back together with the guy, but she can have that guy go back to her.
Right. I like that. I like that a lot. And I think the novelist thing works because even if he is an inventor, right? If he's a failed inventor, not because the inventions don't work, but because no one wants to buy them, because they're all designed for progress, not profit, then he just writes science fiction novels as like a way of getting by.
Yeah.
And that is like popular. So it's like he has this failed meeting at this board and you think like, oh, he's like a failed inventor, and he is, but then he gets a call from his agent. And his agent is just like, yeah, man, that really sucks. Anyway, when's that next novel coming? Because, you know, you got this book signing and you really need to announce what your next thing's going to be. And like that whole thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think that all works. I think both of our ideas kind of just merge together in a really clean, nice way.
I love when that happens.
Yeah.
So that's the present, 2024.
Yes.
What happens in the past?
Well, so we
haven't even figured out. Well, hold on. That's the meet cute. We haven't even figured out how he gets to the past yet.
Right. Well, that's what I think. I think that's what she's researching is like the time machine. Yeah.
So it isn't this random philosophy professor that he happened to have when he was in college. So what the book that the notebook that she hands him is how he does it. But we still have to send him to the World's Fair.
Right. So my thought there is that, like, first of all, I think that the thing that he invents that he's trying to propose or whatever is like a time machine that doesn't send you to the past, but like basically gives you a window to it so that you can like see the past the way that it really was, right?
Mhm.
But they're just like, I don't know why anyone would need this or what use this is. He's like, think about all the things we could learn about the past and like how things really were and yada yada. And they're like, that's not going to be profitable. Like that's pointless. It's cute. Don't get me wrong, but like whatever. And it's her notebook that makes him solve the problem of actually getting a physical body to go to the past rather than just looking through it, a window at it.
Well, you also, since we need it to be at the 1964 World's Fair, really the only thing that remains of the 1964 World's Fair is the Unisphere.
Right.
You know, the Men in Black 2 spaceship.
Yeah, yeah. And the saucers.
The saucers.
Yeah.
But like literally it can be he goes to these things and he goes up to the top, he like goes around, he figures out a way to get in, he doesn't go back. It doesn't work. He goes back to the notebook and he tries to figure out what he did wrong. And it literally when he's trying to find a light to read the notebook from, he can literally find in the light of the notebook, because presumably he's there at night, he finds a place where he just wrote "it worked."
Oh, yeah.
And then he goes, oh my God, okay. And so he goes back, he follows the steps, goes back around. It doesn't work. He gets back down. And then when he opens the door of the Unisphere, he opens the door out into the World's Fair.
Yes, that's great. I love that.
But when he opens the door, he trips and falls and breaks it. And so he's there. But the next time he goes and sees the World's Fair door, it's a different door. So it's not going to work anymore.
Right.
So one-way trip.
Right. Absolutely. I love that.
Okay, so we're in the past.
We're in the World's Fair because I think he's going there to meet her.
Of course he is.
Yeah.
She's exhibiting her invention that's gonna change the world of tomorrow.
Well, here's my pitch for that, because we have to involve Christopher Plummer somehow.
We do.
Christopher Plummer's character, who my pitch would be to drop the Robinson from his name, because I just think William Fawcett sounds like a 1960s guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think he is almost like a Walt Disney type figure where he's the showman. And I think that our Elise is a person of color. And I think that he is basically taking credit for her inventions
100%.
because it's like and you think like, oh, he's like a total piece of shit who's doing this. But as he explains in the same kind of speech as Christopher Plummer with Christopher Reeve, he's just like, no, like they're fighting for civil rights, but like it hasn't happened yet. And we're splitting this. Like, it's not like I'm taking all of her money away. I'm not a dick. It's just that like, this is the reality of the world we're in, and she can't be the person out front with these inventions. Yeah. I don't like it any more than you do, but like, she needs me as much as I need her. And that's the situation that we're in, because that's the reality we're in. And it's a whole thing where it's like, he's like, oh, that's right. That's the part that sucks about this era.
Yeah. Well, and you also get to say, like, you then get to still have him be the villain of, she needs me as much as I need her. And I really need her.
Right.
And I don't need you.
Because I'm nothing without her.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you get to still have him be like beaten up and thrown away or whatever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Because he's our hero. He needs to just barely miss out. But no, she trusted love.
Right. Right.
But yeah, okay. That makes sense. That's end of really kind of act 3. So like, what we need to do is like, how does our Richard Collier character woo her other than just showing up?
Well, I mean, I think he shows up and he goes to the pavilion, and I think the first thing that he is surprised by is
what's their invention?
That's a great question. I don't know. Well, but the thing is, like, I don't know that it necessarily needs to be an invention. I mean, it can be, but there were some inventions at the World Fair. It wasn't quite like how Tomorrowland presented it, where there was like an invention contest. You know,
Tomorrowland, Kaladesh, pick your nerdery.
Yeah, but it was more about like these corporate sponsored pavilions of showing concepts for the future. You know, like GM's Futurama. They're like, I think it was like the alley of the, like, it was something alleyway of the, or like streetway, something like that. But it was like showing like future cities and like all this stuff.
Does that make that very dangerous for Richard Collier? Because he specifically has to avoid visions of the future.
No, because none of it happened.
Right, but he doesn't know that. He can't step into the pavilion because if they got it right, he's gone.
Oh, you think so?
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know that it would really, I don't think that would really work that way.
I mean, I still like the idea of like finding the loose change and literally he's undone by a penny.
Yeah.
I do like that. There's certainly a lot less pockets on an outfit from the 60s.
Sure.
But like, I like the idea of, and like, honestly, what I think would be funny is if it's not a penny that does it, if it's a pen and it's a pen that is from whatever university or book signing that he went to,
that's
whatever
funny.
he used to use to take notes.
Yeah.
And then someone, like, he drops it or something when he steps out of the door and someone else finds it and hands it back to him like, oh, by the way, you dropped this a long time ago. Pens are a lot more valuable in the 60s. I wanted to make sure I got this back to you.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. That's fun.
But anyway, like presuming they aren't doing, like, because yes, they did future pavilions or whatever. Like, that is kind of like imagining a world that we'll be stepping into. And I feel like that would potentially be like something that he would be potentially avoiding. And then he finally steps in and he's like, oh, this is what you think the future is going to be like?
Yeah.
We'll be fine.
My feeling was that, like, because it's not hypnosis, he doesn't know that that's a problem.
That's true.
Yeah.
And because it's her research, she wouldn't know it's a problem either.
Right. Yeah.
You're right. Okay, that's fine. So he wouldn't think about it.
Yeah.
Also, we get to have the fun with the retrofuturism, which is just a concept that I love.
Right. And so I think it's a presentation about the future, and he's excited to meet her, assuming that, like, you know, this book that was, you know, this old woman brought it to him, and her name is Elise, and it's this whole thing. And then the person who's taking all the credit is this Christopher Plummer guy. And he's like, wait, you're not the person that was in the Notebook. And then goes and talks to him, and he's very dismissive in that very, like, yes, nice to meet you, blah blah blah, you know, and whatever, and
he gets kicked out, and then Chris goes, anyway, next slide, Elise.
Yeah. And then I think my feeling is, like, I think that there is something deeply romantic about love at first sight, especially in a movie like this, but not based on a photo. I think that seeing her in real life is enough to be like, oh my God, who is that? And then finds out that that's Elise. And he's like, mind blown. Holy shit. She's gorgeous, you know?
Yeah.
And then is like, okay, I have to meet her. I have to talk to her, you know?
Let's take that a step further, even if, like, it's love at first sight, but not her. It's who she is and what she is.
Yes.
Like, he can be kicked out by the Christopher Plummer, William Robinson character, and literally he can be escorted out by Elise, and he's like, yeah, I understand it. It's terrible. And then he's sitting there dejected in the past, doesn't know what to do with himself.
Yeah.
And then he's just sitting in the corner till the end of the day. He has nowhere else to go. And he's watching Elise put everything away, and she's the one doing all of the science and completely disassembling and completely having a complete understanding of all of this machinery because she's the one who built it and knows how it works.
Right.
And when he sees her actually doing this work and having this scientific mind, he's like, oh my God, it's you.
Yeah. So I like that. I would like to take I would almost like to take that moment away from him and give it to her.
Ooh, okay.
By having, in his conversation with Brian Cranston, he's like, I know that you didn't design this because, you know, this, and this. And he's like naming all these scientific things. And so then when he's removed, she comes out and she's like, how do you know about those things?
Yeah. Okay.
Because she knows because she made it.
Yeah.
And she's like, no one should know about me. That's the whole point of all of this. And therefore, it gives her a little bit more agency, I guess, in all of this.
I agree with you. I think that's very clever.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah. And I think they fall in love with, like, the future and, like, this romantic view of the future. But there's an important thing that happens in the 1964 World's Fair, a social event, which is that in 1964, there was a civil rights protest. 700 protesters showed up. 300 of them were arrested. And I think that,
awesome. Not the arrest, the fact that they showed up.
Yeah, but I think that moment should happen while he's there. That will really like color one. It'll set up the conversation he needs to have with the Christopher Plummer guy about like why he's doing this and why he's like taking credit and all of this stuff, but also really establish our guy as like, yes, he romanticized the optimism, but like things weren't great back then, as great as he thought they would be, you know, and really puts that into perspective for him about like, oh wait, like things are better in the future among this stuff, but then it's not as optimistic as it was. And it's like, you know, and it really just sort of like creates a more fully rounded view of what his feelings are about all of this, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm into that. That sounds awesome. Okay, cool. All right. So does that mean that Richard and Elise join the protest? Did they get arrested?
I absolutely think they both get arrested. And I think that's the moment that Christopher Plummer is like really goes off on him, because it's like,
okay,
yeah, because it's like you're ruining this. Like, she can't be arrested. Like,
we've got a good thing going.
Yeah.
Why would you rattle those walls, or whatever the expression is I'm trying to think of?
Right. As it stands, like I now have to go to our sponsors, our corporate sponsors, and tell them like, no, she was not part of the protest. She doesn't believe in the civil rights movement. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like, and he's like, but none of those things are true. And he's like, it doesn't matter if it's not true. They're white, and that's what I have to say. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. I'm into it. That works for me.
Cool. Where it's just like, you know, it's really nice to be optimistic about the future, but like, that's not reality, my guy.
But none of us have actually seen the future. So You know what?
Yeah, right. Exactly. And then, you know, I think that they're gonna like, I don't know where she's leaving to toward the end, but.
Well, it's the World's Fair. So they have to go back to wherever the next presentation that the sponsors are doing. So now they just have to go give presentations for like their sponsors have to give it for all of their little rich friends to show off all the fancy things that they're doing. They have to spend their lives going to all these dinner parties for rich white people who just see them as tools and toys to show off to their friends, because that's entertainment of the era.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I think that's... And
they'll be well paid, they'll be well compensated, but they will basically be living toys for the rich.
Yeah. And so then, she doesn't do that, and she stays behind, and they have their, you know, their big romantic day and night, and then he finds the penny or the pen, and then gets zapped back.
Yeah, and then do you want him to waste away because he has nothing left going for him? Or do you want him to turn this entire story into a book?
I feel like I don't know, man. That's the tough part, is like figuring out the best way to end this. But my feeling is, I like something about what you said very early on, which was like mentioning the idea of like extrapolating what the future of the 80s or the future of the 70s or the future of the 60s would look like in modern day. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if the thing that he obsesses over when he comes back is like, he knows that he could go back, right? He could go back to the 60s, but like, he's worried about the fact that like, he won't be able to actually change anything, because he knows that she's going to come to him at that book signing, pass away. And like, you know, there's nothing. He's worried about like, is there anything I can do to fix this?
I think he should try to go back, because I think that's why we learned that the switching out the door, changing it, is like ruined this thing that made it a one-way trip, and he didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
I don't think he should waste away, but I think
that's not what I was saying.
No, I know.
Okay.
But like I think that this is, if he's going to be doing the trying to find an optimism to try to inspire a better future, he spent some time looking around in the 60s and realizing it wasn't as great as he thought it was.
Yeah.
He should be back in the present and looking around and seeing that everything's not as great as he thought it was.
Yeah.
And I think he should be then spending the rest of his life trying to turn this into the future that they hoped it would be.
Yeah.
And you can literally have him drawing it out, mapping it out, writing it out, while sitting next to her gravestone.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, oh man, yeah. And you just think about like, because just the idea of like him saying something like, so people just like asking him like maybe it's another book signing when that book comes out.
Yeah.
And and people are like talking about maybe like how romantic of an idea the story was and all these things. And he's like, they're like, where do you come up with these things or whatever? And he just says something like, I just like thinking about the future. And it's like this, and then you sort of like cut to them together again, in the afterlife or whatever, because it's like what he's really saying is like, yeah, I'm going to be doing all of this, all these things that we talked about. But like what I'm really thinking about is like the day that I get to die and I get to be reunited with her.
I can't live in the version of the past that I want to. So all I can do is imagine a future where I'll finally be happy.
Right.
And then we finally get to that future and it's him dead and together again with.
Yeah.
Got it.
And we never see if he accomplished any of that or in his lifetime or anything like that. It's just about him inspiring the hope, the optimism again.
Yeah.
In his readers and
awesome.
Presumably, that being a lot of people. So, yeah.
We can even have some of those same readers like at the two different book signing, our bookends of book signings.
Yeah.
Of being like, because like I had a conversation with one of my guests from last year. This wasn't a conversation I had on the podcast, but I went to this conversation with Ben Crane talking about how one of the things he really believes in with his science fiction writing is that you can track scientific progress based on the literature. And in the 50s and 60s, it was hopeful, optimistic views of what a wonderful future we're going to have. And that inspired tons of people to become scientists. And then you get to the 80s where a lot of the views of the future were like bleak, dystopia, darkness. And then people who were interested in pursuing the sciences dropped because what did they have to look forward to work towards? And so sometimes all it comes down to is really just being hopeful about the future is what will inspire people to work towards making it better and possible. And so you get to have the people at the beginning at the book signing being like, yeah, man, you're totally getting the concept of what it is to live now. It sucks now. Oh my God, everything's terrible. And then those same people can come in at the end and be like, hey man, this is going to be so cool. I didn't even know that people were working on this sort of thing. That's so exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's good. I think another version of it could be that like, if it's not a book signing or reading, or like it could be you cut to like I don't know, like some kind of like, I guess some kind of reading, but it's like somebody that we've never seen before. And they're reading it in a memoriam for this like huge author that had this incredible life of like all of these books that inspired all these things. We never leave this room. Of the future, right? Of just this signing, but they're talking about like all these things and like, yeah, like he inspired me to be a scientist or whatever, all these things. And then you're like, and like, you said you knew him like right before he died. And he says, yeah. And then she says the thing that you said, he always said, like, I always think about, being a future that I could be happy in. And then you cut to them reunited or something like that.
I have a weird bit for you, and let's find out if you like it.
Okay.
What if this old woman hands him the notebook at the previous book signing? He's like, okay, and he like puts it in his bag or something.
Yeah.
And he doesn't think about it. And then a week or so later, he has a lawyer show up and say, hey, I wanted to let you know, a woman died and she left you something in her will. He's like, yeah, I'm an author. People leave me things in their will all the time. And what did she leave me? The plot next to hers. What?
I love that. No, that's fun. That's really fun.
And so like literally she bought two plots next to each other at the cemetery. And he's like, what? And so he goes and visits. He's like, what is going on? And that's what gets him to start reading the notebook.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's great. That's great.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But it just might work.
Yeah. Oh, man, that's great. Yeah, because then you're like, yeah, he always wanted a future. And you know what? I think he really accomplished it. And then you just cut to the cemetery and the two graves next to each other and then fade, to that weird white void that they were in.
Yeah, that white void where Barbie met the lady who made Barbies.
Except instead of a white void, It's the World's Fair.
Yeah. Okay.
So
it's
more like the Titanic ending.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. I like it.
Yeah. And there you go. That's a Somewhere in Time remake.
Movie.
Yeah.
All right. I feel good about that.
Yeah, me too.
Ready to talk about casting?
Sure.
I don't know how any of mine work for our version, but we're going to figure it out. All right. So I feel like we got to start with our Richard Collier.
Yeah. Do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I can start. We'll talk about
Okay.
mine. I don't know that we're going to go with him. I think I did Oops All White People or Oops No White People for this.
Oh, gotcha.
And I was like, well, and so because I was very much leaning into the fact that we're probably going to be placing this in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's going to be like a little bit more interesting if it is a little bit more of a racially diverse cast.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was trying to find someone because in my head, I was like, well, the perfect casting for this is Andrew Garfield.
Interesting.
And I was like, he is very good. I actually think he might be a little bit too old. He's 39. That's not too old, but like that sort of concept for, and I also was like, superhero kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Because the thing about Christopher Reeve at this time is he's only 28 when he was in this movie, but like
he doesn't look it.
28 in 1980 is not 28 now.
No.
Now it's like 38.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So like that same sort of idea. So I was like trying to find someone along those lines who kind of had that same vibe, but was a little bit younger, but certainly not at the height of popularity. Like I'm going to guess you don't know who this dude is. I saw him in Upload. He's also in Not Dead Yet. He was in Pam and Tommy. It's an actor named Josh Banday.
I don't know him by name, but I've seen a bunch of the things you just said. Okay, yeah. I recognize this guy, but
I don't know that he necessarily works, but like, because I felt like you'd probably have this right on the money of who it should be. But I was like, let me have another name.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't, my thing with this is that like, I kind of want movie stars in the two leads, you know, and I'm not talking about, I mean, that's tough, you know, in terms of movie stars, because there's not a lot of those right now, but I was really wanting somebody that had like a thing.
Yeah.
And this guy, like maybe we put him in one of the spots that we didn't cast somebody.
We'll see.
Just to have him in there. But yeah. Like I would buy him as like the doctor, Finney, the time travel doctor guy.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But that's not even a character we need anymore.
Oh, that's true. You're right.
Because now the time travel doctor is Elise McKenna.
You're right. Wow.
So I'm perfectly happy not going with him. I was just like, I wanted to find somebody.
Sure.
Who did you have? Who's your A-lister?
So I don't know that either of my choices are A-listers, because like right now, like A-list actors who are in this age range are either like too beefy, you know?
Yeah.
Or like you can't really count on them to actually be A-listers, or they're just way too old.
Sure.
Or they just look too young. Like your Tom Hollands, your Timothée Chalamet's.
Absolutely.
You know, that doesn't work. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to have to lean on the star quality of who I want for Elise. So I'm going to go not quite A-list, but like really strong people and people who have said in the past that they want to do a romance film. And so at first I went with Dev Patel, but again, once I started thinking about the whole like racial angle of everything, I was like, yeah, he kind of has to be white in order to make all of that really work properly.
In order for him to not remember the fact that the 60s weren't great for some people.
Yes, exactly. So then I was thinking like, okay, like who's like an interesting, maybe like Christopher Reeve equivalent, who's played a superhero before, but isn't maybe as like well known in roles like this, but people, whenever he shows up in something, especially recently, people are like, oh damn, like that guy's hot.
If you go with Brandon Routh, I'm going to be very surprised.
He's way too old.
He's way too old.
Way too old. No, I went with Will Poulter.
Oh, wait.
Who was very recently in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, but also was in The Bear in an episode that everyone lost their minds about how hot he is now. I
mean, everyone knows him from the meme.
Sure. Yeah.
From the We're the Millers. Although a lot of people also know him from Maze Runner.
Oh, I haven't seen those.
Previous guest of both of our shows, Chimera, had me watch all the Maze Runner movies.
Oh. But yeah, he is 6'3" and is a hunk. and I've got this, let me show you this one particular
Is he a good leading man? Like, he's always like the side character or kind of the asshole. I don't know if he's ever been the leading man. And I could be wrong.
Is your guy a leading man?
No.
Okay, yeah.
No. This is a question I should be asked as well. And so like
yeah.
and
I'm sending you in the chat. I'm sending you a picture of him that has the sort of like 1960s vibe, because I think the other thing that's important is that he needs to look like a guy that is attractive, but also like kind of, you would believe that he would be like a nerdier guy.
Yeah, you need 15, 20 years ago Lee Pace, I understand.
Yeah. Certainly.
Which is what he looks like in that picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and that's the argument. That works for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Will Poulter's a good pick. I think that's a good choice.
I don't think he's a movie star currently, but I think he has the power to become one.
I agree.
If somebody put him in the right role, and I think this is the right role.
I agree with that as well. Yeah, no, I'm good with Will Poulter. That works for me.
Cool.
Because again, if we could get Lee Pace 20 years ago, that would be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But
talk
alas,
about ideal. Can we just start pulling actors from all of history?
If only. It would certainly make my job a lot easier because I am running out of people. This is episode 149.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So let's talk about Elise McKenna. Let's talk about our wizard of the past, our science lady.
Yeah. So, again,
how old is Will Poulter? I'm so sorry.
He is 31.
Perfect.
So, in terms of movie stars, I think my mind, quickly goes to who is probably the biggest movie star actress right now, which is Zendaya. You get it. It is tough because she is incredible, but one of the things that I think that she has a hard time with is playing her age, because she's 27, but she doesn't really look 27. She looks under 23.
Yeah.
And it's tough. I did find, I'm sending you a picture of a look that she has, especially with the hair, that I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Like, she looks a little older. It's a little bit of like an old-fashioned kind of retro hairstyle for her.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of works. It's what she wore on the red carpet at the Oscars this year, that hairstyle specifically.
For any listeners.
Yeah, for any listeners. Even still, I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite work for me. So despite the fact that there is a 10-year age difference between these two actors, between Poulter and the actress I'm about to say, not in the direction that you think.
No, I assume it's going in the other direction.
Yes, but the funny thing is that, this actress doesn't look anything like her age. I mean, at all. In fact, if she tried to play her own age, I don't think anyone would buy it, much in the way that you don't really buy a Zendaya at any older than like 23.
Yeah.
But also, funnily enough, Jane Seymour was older than Christopher Reeve in Somewhere in Time. So I thought that was kind of a fun thing.
Yeah.
So I went with Lupita Nyong'o.
Oh.
Who I just think is one of the most beautiful women on the planet.
Absolutely.
And one of the greatest actresses we have on this planet. And
Also
I think
true.
that she could absolutely pull off the sort of like manic, romantic, like scientific mind that our version of Elise would need to have, while also being someone that, I think audiences would immediately be like, oh yeah, I get it. Like, I get why he was like instantly infatuated with her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good pull.
Who did you have?
I went with someone who is 29, but also it's tended to play a little bit younger.
Mm-hmm.
She is, in terms of fame, certainly on her way up. You have seen her. She was in Ahsoka. She was in Day Shift. I went with Natasha Liu Bordizzo. She played Sabine Wren.
Oh, okay.
And because you want competency, you want emotion, Ahsoka's not good, but I don't think that that's her fault. I think that she is still a good actress, and I think that is her kind of vibe that she has in the show of, I am capable of doing something, is good. And again, it's the 1960s. The 60s weren't kind to a lot people of a lot of different racial backgrounds, and so
that's true.
I was like, that felt interesting to me. A left field choice. Lupita Nyong'o is obviously amazing. I'm perfectly happy to go with her. But in terms of, I don't know. This is one where would be happy to go either way.
Mm-hmm. My only concern with her is
she doesn't have the star power.
She doesn't have the star power, but also I think she's white passing enough that it doesn't quite do our story justice.
That is a fair argument, and that is enough, honestly. Like, let's go with Lupita Nyong'o in that case.
I apologize for taking the two leads.
I don't care.
I know, but I know we like taking turns around here. I know.
I literally have two roles that you didn't cast.
Oh, fair enough. That's true.
Let's do one of them next.
Okay.
So we didn't talk about this character at all while we were doing kind of the recap of the movie as it exists. But there's this valet who works at the hotel named Arthur Beale, who basically was at the hotel in 1912 when his dad was working there. He was like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And 60 years later, he's still working at the hotel as a valet. And he's kind of
the one which sucks because it's like, dude, your dad like ran this hotel. Like, why are you still a valet? That really bummed me out. I was like, God, your life is a bummer, my guy.
Yeah, that poor guy. And like, he lives at the hotel too. Like, he doesn't live in town. He lives at the hotel.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, there's a hotel that was built. One of the first Sheratons ever built was built for the World's Fair, and I thought that could be the hotel, and maybe that's where this guy works.
I don't think we necessarily need a hotel, but like,
Well, I mean, he's got to. They do hook up. That needs to happen somewhere.
I'm going to go on a limb and presume she has an apartment.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Yeah, that works.
But yeah. But like, there's this character who is the through line through time, who was at the 1964 World's Fair and is also being like, no, you don't understand. It was so cool. Like, it gave us something to believe in. It gave us hope.
Yeah.
And I have an actress who could kind of embody that idea of like unabashed optimism, who would have been around for the 1964 World's Fair and is around right now and still does stuff occasionally.
Okay. Her
name is Shirley MacLaine.
Oh, so here, you want to know what's something great? I don't know if you knew this. So I did a shitload of World's. You obviously didn't know this because you know we were doing a World's Fair.
That's true.
Okay, so here's the thing. I love this. And the reason I love this is because at the 1964 World's Fair, they did one movie premiere. And that movie premiere starred Shirley MacLaine.
Which movie?
What was it? It was, hold on, I have the thing open because it was...
Because I can't imagine the World's Fair showed The Apartment. It feels like that'd be more like a What a Way to Go kind of movie.
No, because the Apartment came out in 1960, so it was out for a while before the World's Fair. Yes, it was What a Way to Go.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, 1964.
I remade that movie.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, I remade
it
that
premiered at the World's Fair.
Amazing. I remade that movie with the creator of... Oh no, I'm forgetting the name of the show.
Oh no.
It's the show about a bunch of stoners who work in an office.
Oh, Office Space?
No.
Oh.
I made it remade it with Connor Pritchard. It's a fun episode.
Oh.
Workaholics.
I'm sorry. I was thinking in the wrong direction. I was thinking about the movie you would be remaking, not the show he created.
No.
Sorry.
Connor Pritchard created Workaholics, and I remade What a Way to Go with him because it's a movie he grew up with.
Oh, okay.
But cool. Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun movie. Honestly, people, if you haven't seen that movie, it's wild.
Yeah. Well, it premiered at the World's Fair.
And learning that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, Shirley MacLaine for Arthur as our through line, it kind of makes so much sense.
That's perfect. I love that so much. And I think that she would do it in a heartbeat because... Oh, yeah, you want me to play somebody who was at the World's Fair? Well, guess what?
I'm going to tell you how awesome that day was. One of the best days, let me tell you.
Oh, man. Yeah. No, I love that. I want to plus up your pitch for the character.
Great.
Because I want him, if he's in New York, right, as this writer, I want him to have an obsession with the World's Fair, just like as a concept of like this starry-eyed obsession with it. And so he's always going to this World's Fair museum and she's runs the World's Fair museum.
Yeah.
And so they're like, he's known her forever. And yeah, so it's like a real friendly kind of
perfect
thing. Yeah.
Love it. Love everything about that. Let's talk about William Robinson.
Okay.
Speaking of characters who are white passing, I wanted like that exact vibe for this character of like, I put on a great face, I'm gonna tell you about all of these different things. Like can play sleazy manager, but like can also like be earnest, but you don't really know which is the real version of him.
Mm-hmm.
I saw him most recently in Poker Face, but he's in the new Mother of the Bride, and he's in Miss Congeniality. It's an actor named Benjamin Bratt.
Yeah, right. Benjamin Bratt. He's an interesting guy. I the idea of him in the 60s is very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
He looks like a guy who has driven thousands of motorcycles. He just has that vibe about him. He definitely seems like a motorcycle guy. He's also in isn't he in that Apple TV Plus show Loot? He's in Loot, I think.
Maybe, I don't know.
Have you not seen Loot?
No.
Oh, Sam. Oh, you would love Loot.
Okay.
Loot's your jam. Absolutely.
All right, hell yeah.
Loot's your jam. It's literally, it feels like revenge porn against Jeff Bezos as a sitcom.
Yeah, I'm into it.
Yeah, you'll love it. So yeah, no, Benjamin Bratt's great.
Cool.
I really like Benjamin Bratt, and he doesn't get a lot of opportunities to play roles like this.
Mm-hmm.
He typically like plays like, I don't know, just like guys that older women find incredibly sexy. That tends to be like what his roles are now, which is interesting. I wanted like more of a one-to-one with like a Walt Disney type.
Sure.
Just based on like what my pitch was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I went with Bryan Cranston.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, just because I could picture both the extremely charming showman that everyone loves and also the behind the closed door, don't you fuck with me, that guy, and the fact that he can do both of those things was what was attractive to me. I also toyed with the idea of Hugh Grant just because I like Hugh Grant and I like seeing him play big characters, but Bryan Cranston is kind of where I landed.
I think that's fun. I might push us more towards Benjamin Bratt in this case.
Sure. Sure.
A little bit younger, especially if we perceive him as a romantic threat. And he's like, I don't care about her romantically. I care about her sweet, delicious brain.
Right. That's true. That's very true. Yeah. Yeah.
And then that's probably the last of your characters. I also had like the assistant / maid.
Right.
The person who was like with the Elise McKenna character all the way up. I don't know that we need this character. I don't think it fits anymore. So I'm perfectly happy to just drop that character entirely and not talk about her.
Okay.
I had Celeste O'Connor. She's in Ghostbusters Afterlife. She's in Freaky. She's in Madam Web. And she's better than those projects have allowed her to be.
Sure.
And I was like,
That's
she is very good, and I think she would be good at this. But I don't think we need that character. I don't think it fits the version of the movie that we have.
I agree. Let's get to writer-director.
Yeah, I have separate writer-director. Do you have a hyphenate, or do you have...
I'll be perfectly honest. I have a director who writes a lot of the movies that he directs, or co-writes a lot of the movies he directs. So I was just fully prepared to just kind of figure this out with you.
Then let's do my writer, your director, and then my director, and then we'll see.
Great.
My writer has written lots of things. She wrote All the Bright Places. She wrote Mindhunter, The Post, and Long Shot.
Oh, man. I thought about her, actually.
About Liz Hannah.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
I'm fully on board with her.
Great.
I love Liz Hannah. Yeah. I love Long Shot.
I know.
Yeah, that's a great movie. Also, it's pretty crazy to write a screenplay that ends up on the blacklist and then Steven Spielberg directs it as your first movie, first credit. Wild.
I believe I've heard interviews with her where she's like, yeah, I don't think it's real either, but here we go.
Yeah, I know.
But like the mix of Long Shot and Mindhunter is basically this movie.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah, absolutely.
Who's your director?
I put somebody who, so like I wanted somebody who would be capable of making a movie. You know, I wanted somebody with a deep cinematic background, but somebody who I love, I talk about all the time, but no one ever kind of gives the credit where credit's due. But I do think that he did direct what I believe to be one of the most romantic movies ever made. It's not like high on my list, but I do love them in this movie. The movie is Walk the Line, and the director is James Mangold. I just think James Mangold is great. I think he makes really great movies. And I think that he doesn't feel, I don't know, his stuff isn't always, it's not flashy most of the time in a way that like speaks to a lot of people, but for whatever reason, there's something about James Mangold that I just adore. And I look at his long filmography starting back in the 90s. You know, he did Girl Interrupted. He did that Identity movie, which is very weird, about alternate personalities, like being in a motel together. And he's done, he did Walk the Line. He did obviously the 2 Wolverine movies. He did a movie called Kate and Leopold, which is a movie that absolutely should not work. And yet it absolutely does. And yeah, I just find him, he's definitely a journeyman director, but he always puts 1,000% into every project that he makes. Right now he's directing a Bob Dylan biopic with Timothée Chalamet. And I don't know, I just really like James Mangold a lot.
He has a full roster of upcoming movies, including Swamp Thing, a Star Wars movie, something called Juliet, and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Captain Nemo.
Yep. He's an in-demand guy.
He absolutely is.
Yeah. But I'm curious what you brought.
So basically, I did this same sort of thing that I was doing when I was looking for my writer, is I was looking for people who can do romance. Like, at the end of the day, like, because that is what this movie is. It's a romance movie.
Yeah.
And regardless of if there are, like, romance plots in other movies, like, I kind of needed that little bit of that thread. And so it's not a type of movie that gets made a lot anymore. So it gets hard to find all the romance movies. And so I found a director who did a romantic movie, but also is a director on the TV show Shrinking. And Just Like That, because like they're also getting to the head of characters, but they directed The Sun Is Also a Star. And this director's name is Rai Russo Young.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen The Sun Is Also a Star. Interesting.
So I basically went with a female writer and a female director. Like, she has done a lot of TV. She also did Before I Fall. The Sun Is Also a Star is the movie starring Yara Shahidi and Charles Melton. That was it in terms of things that I recognized. I
vaguely remember this movie. I never saw it. I kind of want to now.
I think you'd like it.
Oh, you liked it? It's good?
No, it's sight unseen. I think you'd like it.
Okay. So you haven't really even seen much of her work.
I do so much on this show, Scott, that if I only did movies that I personally have seen.
That's true.
I'm perfectly happy to go with James Mangold and Liz Hannah.
I would just like to go with them just because I feel weird about picking someone that neither of us have seen their work.
Right, exactly. Like, that is the problem.
Yeah.
And this isn't one of those situations where I'm like, no, it has to be a female director. Like, no, James Mangold can do this.
Yeah. And I think co-writing this with Liz Hannah, I think that makes perfect sense.
I think it'll be fine
for him. And
as long as, and this doesn't feel like an overwhelmingly taxing movie, and I believe he'll be able to fit it into his very busy schedule.
I agree. He can also abandon one of those. That's fine.
Well, more importantly, like, I'm sure a lot of those things will be super duper stressful, and how fun will it be to go hang out at the New York Fair in the 1960s and be like, oh no, this is just fun.
Yeah.
Filming this is a fun experience for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man.
But yeah, let me take you through Somewhere in Time. Richard Collier is going to be played by Will Poulter. Elise McKenna is going to be Lupita Nyong'o. Arthur Beale is going to be Shirley MacLaine. William Robinson will be Benjamin Bratt. All of this will be written by Liz Hannah and directed by James Mangold. That's Somewhere in Time. Scott, you going to watch this movie?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. That's the episode. Scott, thank you so much once again for being my guest. Now's the time. Will you please let people know about where to find you online, and once again about the various shows that you make?
Yeah, you can. I don't really use social media much anymore, so you don't want to find me there. But you can find me on my other various podcasts, Franchisography, The Doctor's Companion, and you can listen to my writing or co-writing on Geek by Night, which is a scripted narrative podcast that you can get wherever you get your podcasts. And if it's not all out at this point, most of it's out. Probably all but the final episode.
This episode should be out in June.
The question's still there. This question still stands. It might be on the Patreon. I don't know. Question still stands.
Good reason to join the Patreon.
Yeah, that's true. Very true. Thank you, everyone, for listening, I guess, to us talk about this movie you probably have never heard of.
No, but I will say that this movie is available. You can find it. I think I watched it on Freevee or something.
Yeah.
It's on Freevee, it's on Tubi. You can find it.
Yeah.
It's available, and if this movie sounds like your vibe, genuinely sit down and watch it. It's great.
Yeah.
It's very sweet. If you're interested in finding me, I am online at Instagram at Ideal Remake, or you can find me on BlueSky, where I am at Sam Gasch, SamGasch. Or you can find both Scott and I on the Dueling Genre Discord, which has a link in the show notes for this very episode. And yeah, that is the contactables. I will end this episode the same way that I end every episode. Scott, what is your favorite quote from the movie Somewhere in Time?
I will go with, I'm an actress, not a doormat. Do not attempt to wipe your boots on me.